Hi, Jerelyn. Thanks for being here today and good to see you.
Of course, so excited to be here. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can hop right into it. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Jerelyn Rodriguez today. She is the co founder and CEO of Knowledge House and also a 2015 Camelback Fellow. So, right over to you, Jerelyn. I introduced you briefly just now, but can you share a little bit more about yourself and the work that you're doing with Knowledge House?
Of course. So, at the Knowledge House, I play the role of co founder and CEO. And in my role, I basically lead all of the business operations and external affairs of the organization. The Knowledge House is a nonprofit that provides code and design job training to young people. And we started out in the Bronx, New York, but now we have programs in New Jersey, Los Angeles, Atlanta. So I'm very excited about our growth. A little about me, I started the Knowledge House now 10 years ago with my co founder, Joe Carano. And before that, I spent about 6 years working in the education field. I received my calling to start the Knowledge House, let's say when I was on my way to a college interview. So several years ago, I thought I was gonna go to college, study film, and then be a Hollywood director. And during one of my college interviews, uh, I was on the college campus and I bumped into this conference that focused on the achievement gap. And that was the first time that I learned about the achievement gap and what that statistic was, right? And so this was back in like 2007. And back then, I had learned, well, only 10% of young people from low income communities make it to and through college. And like I was one of them because I was literally on my way there. But I didn't know that statistic. Like I grew up in low income neighborhoods. I grew up, going to public schools. And then for high school, I went to a private school, but I did not realize, like, wow, I'm literally one of 10%. That changed everything for me. Because from that point on, I was like, wow, we really need to focus on education inequity and make sure that low income people have access to college and alternative pathways. Like that 10% is too small and it shouldn't be that way. So even though I did go to college, I studied film, but I always had internships in education. Like I was a student teacher my last year in college. Um, so that was just the career pathway that I was on. And so when I graduated, I became the national program director at this education reform nonprofit called Students for Education Reform. Um, and then when I was there, I just got to witness my bosses, and my bosses at the time were two young women who did not graduate college, and they had started this nonprofit to solve for educational inequity. So it was like all throughout my adulthood, I just kept having these aha moments. The first one was, okay, education is a big deal. Not everyone has access like you. So you have some privilege that others don't. Even if you grew up poor, what are you going to do about it, right? And then after college, I saw these women starting businesses and they were young. And a lot of them were of color. And I thought, why not turn to entrepreneurship to solve this problem? And that was around the time that I found Camelback, actually. So everything follows. Uh, but yeah, I had a lot of aha moments during my adulthood where I wanted to focus on education and alternative pathways. And I just knew that entrepreneurship was the way to get there.
Thanks for diving into that and actually to dig a little bit more on what you just were talking about on your path to Knowledge House. Can you share a little bit about how you actually came to meet your co-founder and what that looks like and when you guys
Yeah.
started the Knowledge House?
Yeah. So when I was having all of these aha moments, I like bumped into my co-founder. One of the last jobs that I had before starting the Knowledge House was running a campaign for a public advocate elected official in New York City. I worked on this campaign around 2012 or so, and I was in charge of the Manhattan and the Bronx region. And the candidate at the time, she was Reshma Saujani. She was running for public advocate of New York City. Reshma Saujani is also the founder of Girls Who Code. So it was really interesting because during the campaign trail, I had this strategy to mobilize a lot of techies to vote for her. And that's how I met my co-founder. My co-founder at the time, he was running a tech incubator in the Bronx. It was the first tech incubator to ever exist in the Bronx. And he introduced me to a whole bunch of tech entrepreneurs that were working and living in the Bronx. And they were making a lot of money. They were like working on innovative stuff at the time, AR, VR, right? So I was like, wow, they're not working in Manhattan? Like they're really staying in the Bronx? But they were staying in the Bronx and they wanted to give back. And so like my co-founder was the one to introduce me to the Bronx tech ecosystem. And I actually met him because on the campaign trail, I was just looking for office space at his incubator just because it was close. But it ended up being like a whole venture that we create afterwards, right? It was through his network that we were able to design a simple curriculum that focused on coding, 3D printing, digital marketing. And we got those tech entrepreneurs to volunteer and teach this pilot program. So we organized a pilot in 2014. It was a 10-week pilot. Me and my co-founder were the main teachers. I don't know how to code. So he taught the coding, I taught the career stuff, and then these entrepreneurs each taught other subjects. And that was our successful pilot cohort. Me and my co-founder built that program from scratch. And what the Knowledge House is today is a whole evolution from that one program.
That's beautiful. So maybe maybe it's the pilot or maybe it's somewhere else. Can you share an example of a transformative moment or success story from your work with the Knowledge House that has deeply impacted you?
Yeah, absolutely. Me and my co-founder, we always designed the program specifically for job seekers that were not on a college track. And like they probably, finished high school knowing that they didn't want college. But then, of course, things change. The population that we ended up serving included that profile, but it was more diverse. And especially in the pandemic, a lot more like college enrolled students just want more career support. So they come to the Knowledge House. But back in 2016, we had a student, and I really think that this student is our model student. And so when she got a job, I was so ecstatic. But Jennifer Paulino is like one of the success stories that's always top of mind, because literally we designed the Knowledge House for someone like her. Like she found out about the Knowledge House when she was running the front desk at an optical, right? And so she had dropped out of community college, but she was excited about growing her career, learning new skills. And she found like a program flyer at her place of business. And then she just decided to do the program. So she does the program. And not only was she like at the top of her class, and like, of course, we know it's tech. So in most spaces, whether we're talking about the classroom or work, it is mostly male dominated. And for the first time, we have a female that is killing it and is intimidating all of the males. And what's interesting is every year after, we literally either had 50% females and then 50% males, or more females than males. It's like this student turned everything around for us, which was so interesting. But anyway, she finishes the program. She got her first web development job at the New York City Department of Education, which was really cool, right? Because she got a tech job at a government agency. She flourished there. And then most recently, she got a new job as a senior engineer at this company called Kimi. Kimi basically like does copies of keys, and they have a bunch of kiosks. But out of their engineering team, Jennifer is the only one that does not have a college degree, and she leads the team. So props to her, but I'm going to tell you, after Jennifer uh, achieved what she wanted, it's like all of the success stories for these badass females making a lot of money, and I just love that. So right now, the highest paid TKH graduate is a female who works at Bloomberg, and I'm just so proud of that because it makes us really different. Like really, it's a hard sector, so still females aren't equally represented, right? Like they're not the majority. So if we can play a role in really changing that, um, I think that's powerful. And I think we have proof points. Jennifer's one of them. So that's my success story that I always turn to.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's
Of course.
just like really encouraging and lovely to hear a little bit more about that. And kind of on the flip side, which you were about, like, I think you were getting into it, but what has been the biggest challenge for you as a woman founder of color? And how have you overcome that challenge?
Yeah. I mean, I think working in tech, you already see the gender disparities, right? And so just being a COO running tech training, like I'm always trying to think about gender diversity. Um, just to make sure, like literally when women get high paying jobs, their entire family is impacted. It's different than men in a lot of cases, right? So just pursuing that is so important. But it comes with challenges because not only in tech are women the minority in the nonprofit sector. To be a Black woman, it means that you get the least amount of funding than any other nonprofit executive. And so, even though the work at the Knowledge House is hard work and it's such like work that is needed, sometimes it is hard to sustain. Um, I know that the first few years of leading the Knowledge House, fundraising was the biggest challenge. I think in the beginning, you know, folks looked at me and they thought, well, she doesn't look like the average nonprofit leader. And that creates barriers, right? I think it took a long time to overcome those barriers, but they still exist, right? I would say right now, the biggest challenge, honestly, is like sustaining all of the funding that we got in 2020 once George Floyd was murdered, right? The whole world made a commitment that year to invest in Black leaders and invest in organizations that are serving Black communities. And literally, in this very moment, all of that is being challenged. You know, folks are literally at risk of ruining their career or their reputation if they are too public about leading initiatives for Black people. So it's like, what world are we in? Um, so I think that's going to be the next challenge for us to tackle. But being a woman in tech, there are challenges every day, and being a Black woman in philanthropy in the nonprofit sector, there's a lot of challenges. We just have to stay consistent, and overcome them because we can.
Thank you. Yes, those, like, all of those conversations are things that we are always talking about and paying attention to and supporting
Right.
y'all and what's happening in the industry. Um, how has the Camelback Fellowship supported your growth as a leader and the growth of your venture?
Yeah. Look, I will say Camelback was like God sent because literally in 2015, when I became a fellow, I didn't have other resources, So I think Camelback gave me my first grant. And really, Camelback gave me like my first peer group of entrepreneurs. And like, I always go back to that group for anything. Like, In this work, Jessica Santana is my bestie. She was in my Camelback cohort. She leads America on Tech with Evan Robinson. And like we're on the phone every other week talking about fundraising challenges, right? Or talking about expansion. Because as the Knowledge House expands, right, all of those things that I learned in year one at Camelback, I need to go back and think, okay, that was the startup version. Like that's what I needed when I was a startup. What's the version of scale up? And like, how do I teach myself? How do I mobilize resources around me to keep learning to grow the organization? And it's my Camelback cohort, right? Because they have been on this journey with me, growing their ventures. Some of them have stopped their ventures and started new ventures. You know what I mean? So the network is the most valuable, I think. The network over the money, over the content. The network is just strong. And to the point that as folks pursue Camelback, they reach out to me, wanted to have conversations about my experience and like tips for their application. And so that just signals like Camelback is a tight community, right? Like that's what it's supposed to be. So even the applicants feel that. And I love that.
Mm. Yes, community is super, super important. So I'm glad you touched on that. Let's talk about your legacy. So looking ahead 10 years from now, how do you hope the education and tech sector will be transformed as a result of the work that you're leading with the Knowledge House?
Yeah. You know, my dream is that the Knowledge House with other like minded organizations can really provide the general public a tech marketplace, which means that it does not matter your proficiency in tech, you have a place, right? Like the future of work is tech. Everyone needs to just have the basic tech skills or they will be excluded from the economy, right? And so the Knowledge House mostly focuses on job training. So we are looking for folks that are going to make the commitment to do 12 months of training and then go into an engineering career. That's not the majority of folks. The majority of folks just want to learn the basic tech skills to survive and like get their next job. And I want to be responsive to that. So my dream is that with other organizations, we go beyond job training and we really focus on digital equity that leads to economic mobility, right? And so that means that seniors get access to digital literacy. That means that we start as early as possible with youth to make sure that they know what tech careers look like and they know what their pathways are, right? So I see the Knowledge House contributing to this tech marketplace where we can serve youth all the way to seniors with digital equity, exposure, career exploration, and then job training, right? Like we are literally meeting people where they're at across the learning pathway. So I think that we are getting there, right? Obviously, we mostly focus on workforce development programming, but in the past year, we have been providing our applicants with digital literacy workshops just because since the pandemic, there are so many folks that are interested in our programs, but they don't have the basic web and computer literacy skills to persist. So we want to change that to make sure we're being more inclusive.
Thank you for touching on that. Yeah, I love that. So when you think about the work that you're doing currently and the future that you want to build and create that you just touched on, how would you define impactful entrepreneurship?
So that's an interesting question because how you measure impact, I think changes over time, right? Like in the beginning of the Knowledge House, it was about, okay, how many people can we serve? How many lives can we touch? And I'd say in the past few years, it is that, it's always that. But it's also how have you ensured that your staff have been set up for success, that your staff are well, and that your staff are happy? In the past few years, like literally we went from like 20 staff to 60. And so making sure that that impact is felt across the organization is so important. So beyond meeting student outcomes and making sure that our students are getting tech jobs, it's so important that our staff are doing professional development and that they are advancing. right? And that if they identify a growth area to their supervisor, that the organization is supporting those folks to make sure that the advancement happens. Or making sure that people are more engaged overall to improve org culture, right? So I think as we grow, impact is, of course, meeting our outcomes and creating economic mobility for the people that we serve, but also making sure that the staff doing the work are taken care of and that they are set up for success. So you have the tools so that they are meeting the outcomes. And when you don't, you go back to the staff and you go back with training, with wellness. What do you need to do your job well? Um, so that's what impact means to me, right? Having a high performing team that is competent and confident and doing the work to meet the student outcomes.
I like that. That's a fresh perspective. Usually it's like all the external, like you were saying, who you're serving, numbers.
Yeah.
I like how you also include the people that are doing this work.
We got to put the people first. We got to put the people first. They do the hard work, you know?
Yes, agree. What else is next for your venture in 2024 and beyond?
Yes, well, 2024 is a very exciting year because we turned 10. So we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and we are going to have a beautiful event sometime in the summer. And we're also working on the strategic plan to carry us for the next 5 years. So we're working on our TKH 2025 plan this year. We're working with our staff, consultants, and the board to make sure that we have the right strategies to take us through 2030 and to do a lot of the things that I mentioned today, focusing on staff development, staff wellness, expanding digital literacy for the public, and just being more inclusive. And so I'm excited to celebrate this big milestone, which really has me reflecting a lot about the successes and the people who have supported us for the first 10 years. And at the same time, I'm thinking about what's next. So for me, it's a really exciting time. I will be celebrating the entire year and I will be inviting you to our parties. So please stay tuned.
Awesome. Love that. That's exciting. It is also the 10-year anniversary of Camelback as well this year. So that is a nice
happy birthday to us. I love that.
I love it. What advice would you share with your younger self about becoming an entrepreneur?
Oh, I haven't gotten this question. If I were talking to my younger self, you know what? I would tell myself, get a core team. Get a core team of your leadership members so that they can grow the organization with you. You know, I would say, you know, like right now, I'm actually hiring for a COO and I'm hiring for a chief program officer. But if I had hired these people like 5 years ago, we would be bigger and better by now. But that's like startup culture, right? Like you're scrappy, you do it all yourself. Thank goodness now we do have resources to like bring in these experts to help sustain the growth. But if I knew how things were going to play out, I would tell my younger self, all right, by year 5, you're going to experience the transition from startup to scale up, and you should have more help so that you're not doing a lot of it by yourself. What I'll say though, I learned so much in the past 5 years. I've done every job there that exists in the nonprofit sector, probably. So, you know, there are advantages and disadvantages, but I would, you know, offer more help as advice. Yeah.
Always a good one. Lean in for help and don't be afraid to ask for it.
Yeah.
But how can people connect with you to learn more?
Yeah, so theknowledgehouse.org is where you can find information about our programs, how to apply, how to volunteer, and how to donate. There are other ways to support and be involved. As I mentioned, we're going to have a bunch of events this year to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. So if you don't find what you need on our website, you can always email info@theknowledgehouse.org and get in touch with me or someone on our team. But right now, we are going to release our program application in the next few weeks. We are always looking for volunteers to mentor or tutor. And, we are looking for folks to join our network of champions. As we celebrate 10 years, we are planning to enhance and expand the work. So it is not too late to join.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Jerelyn. And thanks everyone who is participating and leaning in. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much. Thank you to Camelback, and happy 10 years to you as well. Thank you so much. Bye.